This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames. And this is
A Little Bit Culty.
Cults are commonplace now. From fandoms to fads, we're examining them all. We look at what happens when things that seem like a great thing at first go bad.
Every week, we chat with survivors, experts, and whistleblowers for real culty stories told directly by the people who lived through them, because we want you to learn a few things that we've had to learn the hard way.
For example, if you think you're too smart to get sucked into something culty, you might be prime recruitment material, and who knows, you could already be in a cult. If you're not aware of your programming, you're probably being programmed, so keep listening to find out.
We'll talk about all sorts of topics on the show, but be aware, this podcast might contain stories that could be alarming to some of our listeners, so please check our show notes for more detailed descriptions and take care of yourself.
Subscribe to our Patreon for Thursday bonus episodes, Q&A, and all sorts of exclusive content. That's patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Welcome to Season 7 of A Little Bit Culty.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to my love. If I let go of it all.
Oh dear,
What?
we have not figured out the name for this episode yet. I think the ones in the running are the Thursday Throwdown. Or it's,
We can call it Bad Taste in My Mouth.
that's going to be really captivating. Who doesn't want a bad taste in their mouth?
I don't know. Might spark some curiosity. What's this guy talking about?
It's still called the Thursday bonus drop for now. We're still taking suggestions.
Oh, I thought you meant specifically what we're talking about.
No,
OneTaste.
the Thursday bonus
Thursday.
bot.
Okay, well, you be more
Bot
precise.
drop.
Be more precise, and I'll play along.
We'll we have a really great episode. As you know, we're trying to stay more up to date with what's happening in the world, and we've been working long term on a more in-depth look at OneTaste, which has been on our radar since we left.
Which will happen in the fall.
Which will definitely cover about the orgasmic meditation group. We're going to get into that in the episode, but there's so much going on in the world right now. Truthfully, we had to take a break from the P. Diddy trial because it was just upsetting. And I also had to look away from the Weinstein trial, though we did find out that it was declared a mistrial. So I don't know what's going to happen from that. But if you want to get real fired up, listen to Candace Owens talking to Harvey Weinstein. I'm just going to leave it there. Leave it there.
Candace Owens is like...
She's derailed. She's off her rocker. She's a nut job. Anyway, in my opinion. What else? In totally different news from the whole coercive control in the legal system topic, Nippy and I just got to do an episode with two of our closest friends on their brand new podcast called Weekend at the Silverfins. We just finished it.
Explain that to them. No one's going to know that.
If you've seen the movie Weekend at Bernie's, you'll know Johnny Silverman. He's married to one of my bestest friends of all time. Her name's Jen Finnegan, and we've been known each other since 1998. They live in LA, and they're both actors and wonderful people. And in this very quiet time in the industry, they decided to start a podcast. And I believe we're their second guests. So we just spent an hour and a half with them.
We're just piggybacking them, you know.
Yeah. It was really fun, and it was a really a great break from, although we did talk a fair bit of the cult stuff, but we talked about other things too. So stay tuned for that. What else? Nippy and I...
We'll drop that on our...
We'll drop it on our
IG.
Yes. And we are excited to be back in Canada this summer. We're wrapping life up here. Of course, the podcast will keep going while we are gone. Nothing will change. You will not miss a beat. We have an incredible lineup for you.
We do have some good ones. We have a couple Canadians on there, too.
Who's Canadian?
Selena Cesar Chavannes.
Oh, yeah. That should be interesting. A little bit outside our normal purview.
Yeah.
We have
trying something new.
Rebecca Lemov, who wrote an incredible book about brainwashing.
She was on Rogan about 2 weeks ago.
She's very smart.
Hitting the pod circuit, Rogan, a little bit culty,
it's just the basics.
Hitting the big ones, right?
We have one about the Source family, which is a lesser known cult, but one of the OG, typical hippie commune cults from the 70s in LA. Really fascinating. And a whole bunch of others that we will roll out over the summer.
Give us some names for the Thursday drop. Thursday drop isn't bad. It's just not flashy or catchy.
This is true. This is true. We are open to suggestions, and we are here for it. So so far, all we have is Thursday Throwdown. That's from Peyton. Thank you. So yeah, our guest today is really fascinating. We will be having her back in the fall for something more
Her
lengthy.
book.
Her book will come out. But we really wanted to capture this moment because this was a big win in the world of coercive control. And we'll let her explain why. But our guest is Ellen Huet, an award-winning journalist and features writer for Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Businessweek, where she covers startups, Silicon Valley culture, technology. She's native of California. She graduated from Stanford with a degree in English and political science. And Ellen gained widespread recognition for her 2018 Bloomberg Businessweek investigation, The Dark Side of the Orgasmic Meditation Company, which exposed allegations of coercive practices at OneTaste, a sexual wellness company.
Her reporting triggered an FBI investigation and inspired her upcoming book on the organization, coming out this fall. We're thrilled to have Ellen here to discuss her groundbreaking work on OneTaste and the broader implication of her findings.
We'll let her explain what happened this week and why this is such an important moment. Welcome to the show, Ellen Huet. Ellen, welcome to A Little Bit Culty.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to just do a little casual chat about your time in the courtroom following the OneTaste trial, knowing that you are coming back in the fall to do a fuller, deeper episode. But until then, tell our audience who you are and what you've been up to.
Yeah, my name is Ellen Huet. I'm a journalist and have been covering OneTaste for a long time. And I'm actually writing a book. It's going to come out this fall called Empire of Orgasm, which tells the whole story of OneTaste from the very beginning all the way up to what we saw happening this week in court in Brooklyn.
Amazing. Well, definitely we will be reading that book.
And you were there for the whole case?
I was, yeah. I missed the first week, but yes, I was sitting in court in Brooklyn for much of the trial. The trial lasted 5 weeks. And most importantly, I was there earlier this week. It's Thursday. But on Monday they were convicted. And then on Tuesday they were actually remanded and taken into custody, which was a big surprise and very dramatic.
Right. Because their bail was revoked. Is that the right term?
That's right.
They weren't.
Yes.
That's shocking to me.
That is.
Why do you think that was?
I mean, it's very complicated, but yeah, as a little context, Nicole Daedone, who's the leader of OneTaste, and Rachel Cherwitz, who was basically her second in command. These two women were indicted and then, on trial. And then when they were convicted, during that period before trial, they were out on bail. And after they were convicted on Monday, the prosecutors were asked by the judge, do you think that these women should be taken into custody? The prosecutors actually said no. And the judge said, okay, I'm going to schedule a bail hearing for tomorrow morning. And everyone came back in the next day at 10. And then at the hearing, the judge was quite stern with Nicole and Rachel's defense attorneys and was really grilling them on how to show that their clients were, first of all, not a flight risk, and second of all, that they weren't threatening the safety of, certain people or the community. And based on what I saw in the courtroom, it seems like the judge was particularly concerned about witness intimidation or things that the judge saw as witness intimidation. We don't need to get into all the details, but there are some. At one point, OneTaste had paid Frank Parlato to write. I know that, Nexium connection, right? So,
wow.
So Frank Parlato shows up in this. At one point, OneTaste had paid Frank Parlato to investigate, and I am putting that in quotes, to investigate the trial. And what had happened was he had written and posted on his blog and various blog sites information about people that might be, that he reasonably assumed might be testifying. That was, pretty disparaging, quite mean, I think is fair to say. And and so I think the judge was quite concerned about that and other various behavior that OneTaste supporters had done. So it was not so much about things that Rachel and Nicole had specifically done, but things that their supporters, kind of their supporters are quite, So I think they, the Nicole's defense attorney basically said, look, these people really love Nicole and Rachel. They may have been a little overzealous. They may have misjudged whether their actions were helping. But it did not seem to sway the judge. And the judge was, took a quick break. And then when we came back from the break, there were 4 deputies from the U.S. Marshal's office in the courtroom, and the judge came back up on the bench and said, bail is denied, and these 2 defendants are going to be remanded into federal custody. And they were taken out a side door, and it was very dramatic.
Wow.
I was shocked, and yeah.
I see the Lifetime movie being written as we talk with this moment in mind. Well, so you were I know we did jump.
Lifetime movie?
I don't know. There's always the Lifetime movie. Don't watch the Lifetime movie about NXIVM. So you're kind of like the Sarah Berman. Do you know Sarah Berman?
I do know Sarah Berman. She actually, she has read an advance copy of my book and is going to give a blurb. She's great. I'm a big fan.
So are we. So she sat through the whole NXIVM trial, as you probably know. So you're the Sarah Berman of OneTaste. I know we just skipped to the end. Let's go back a little bit to the beginning. You wrote one of the first articles that.
Yes. I wrote an article. I wrote a big story for Bloomberg Businessweek back in 2018 about OneTaste, and it was the first time that anyone had really delved deep into allegations of cult-like behavior at this group. So, as general background for listeners who might not know, OneTaste is a sexual wellness company founded by this woman, Nicole and it's really like a wellness company that teaches this practice called orgasmic meditation. Orgasmic meditation is a 15-minute partnered meditative clitoral stroking practice. So it's usually one person, usually a man, is for 15 minutes stroking the clitoris of a woman, and both partners are supposed to meditate on the sensations in their body while they're doing this. And at OneTaste, they built a whole philosophy and a whole practice and sort of lifestyle around orgasmic meditation. And Nicole is really like their spiritual leader, and also was for many years the CEO of the company. So it's both really like a business, like a startup, and this kind of movement about orgasmic meditation. And yes, they'd been around since 2004, and a lot of coverage about them had just been about the curiosity of orgasmic meditation. Of course, there's a lot to be curious about. It's a very interesting practice. A lot of people have found it to be extremely helpful for their sex lives and for helping them connect more deeply in their relationships, to better understand their desire. It's a fascinating practice. I think there's a lot to recommend it. But the more I looked into the dynamics of the company and of the lives of the people who got really involved in the company, these people described really high demand type environment where, you leave behind your old life, your old friends, your old job, your old home, and instead you move into a communal house with other OneTaste people. You start working for the company's sales team. This is a kind of a typical, I'm describing a typical experience.
Right.
You stop associating so much with your family and your other people because you're living this new exciting life within OneTaste where you are doing this practice all the time. You're working on sales. You're sort of a missionary for this new movement. Like they really believe that they were helping kind of heal the world by spreading this practice. And a lot of people talked about going into debt also by buying their very expensive courses. So people tend to experience, like both financial exploitation, psychological exploitation, and sexual exploitation. These are kind of the main allegations against the group.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
This podcast wouldn't even exist without our amazing, supportive, generous patrons. Come find us on Patreon. We are at patreon.com/littlebitculty. Go there for bonus episodes, live Q&As with past guests, exclusive content, and lots of other goodies. Subscribe now and help us keep this podcast going. That's patreon.com/littlebitculty. And now, a brief message from our Little Bit Culty sponsors. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you're supporting this podcast. You've heard from our sponsors. Now let's get back to a Little Bit Culty, shall we?
Yeah.
Did she have any qualifications, Nicole?
I mean, she's a fascinating person. She's a very compelling speaker. I think her qualifications are less credential based and a little bit more on emotional charisma. She has lived a complex life. She talks about her past as a sex worker and a stripper. I think she feels like she has experienced the darkness of sexuality, and that gives her a lot of emotional and spiritual authority to talk about how sexuality can also be this great force for healing. So a lot of people, when they, you talk about her qualifications, it really is kind of this emotional charisma that people felt when they were around her. And she is she's very charming. She's tall. She's beautiful. I think you can understand why people they often, when they met her, they were like, I would like to be like her. I think she was a big model for what people were hoping to achieve by studying under her.
In the courtroom, is this the first time that you were in her presence, or had you met her before for the articles?
I met her in court right after she was indicted. So that was 2 years ago. And it was fascinating because I had watched so many videos of her. The company had filmed a lot of her lectures. I had spoken to all these people about her. I had watched all these videos of her. I felt like I knew her in a certain way quite deeply. But we had not met until 2023. That is when I saw her in person for the first time. And I did actually approach her and say hello in the courtroom. And it was kind of a poignant moment. I describe it at the end of my book.
Oh, wow. I cannot wait to read that. So give us a bit of an arc of your journey in the courtroom. I know we don't have a ton of time today, but just some key highlights of things that really stood out to you.
Yeah. I mean, being in the courtroom was fascinating. From my perspective, it's like I'd been working on this book for several years. I feel like I know many of the characters involved in this story, and then you show up to the courtroom, and many of them are there, and they're showing up. She has a lot of devoted supporters. So every day, I would come into the courtroom, and every day you would see on the right hand of the gallery that there are a lot of familiar faces, like a lot of current OneTaste associates who were coming in to support her. There's like people who have been with the company for 10 or 15 years, and then also some newer people who are like quite devoted to Nicole. And so that was fascinating to see that. And then, on the other side, there often were like assistant U.S. attorneys. There were a lot of interns because it's June. And so a lot of like legal interns who are coming into work for the court would like come in and watch because I think they were curious about it. And then there were like, a handful of reporters, people who were interested in following it as well. And the courtroom is an unusual setting. It's very quiet. You have to leave your devices outside. So when you're sitting in there, you're often waiting and you're taking notes, but sometimes there can be a lot of long lulls. And then there can also be these very dramatic moments, like, when people come up and testify on the stand about some of what they would probably describe as sexual abuse, like they're crying on the stand. Like these women are, some of them teared up and wept a little bit while they were testifying. It was quite moving. And, the whole time there as a reporter, it's like you're trying to watch the witness, you're trying to watch, Nicole and Rachel, you can kind of see their faces from where they're sitting with their attorneys, trying to watch the jury, see how they're reacting. 5 weeks is a long time to be wondering what the outcome of the trial is going to be. So I think there's a lot where you're trying to understand how the case is being presented and what the jury might decide. But the truth is you really don't know until you go into the courtroom and there's been a verdict that's been read. So it feels very high stakes in that moment.
What was that like for you to watch, considering you kind of got the scoop on it, I guess, a little bit?
I mean,
do you think it was justice? Did you think that was?
It's complicated. I mean, I think like there's a lot going on for me. It's like, I've spent all this time researching kind of the backstory of OneTaste, getting these stories of people who were really involved in the company or had very difficult experiences with it. So, in some cases, some of the stories that I heard about while reporting, those stories were also showing up in a similar but different form at trial. And so that was interesting to see, the prosecutors are going for a different outcome. They are trying to present a very specific legal case and, try to convey that to the jury. So they're focused on, they were focused on things, as background, the charge was forced labor conspiracy. So conspiracy just means did two or more people enter an unlawful agreement to try to do a particular crime. You don't actually have to show that they successfully did the crime, but just that they conspired to do it. And then the crime in this case was forced labor, which has a very complicated definition, but generally means obtaining labor from someone through unlawful means. So that could be through like threatening to harm them or actually harming them or threatening to restrain them or threatening reputational harm or financial harm. So there's a lot of different ways that you can define what some of these like unlawful means of getting the labor, but it basically means, like unlawfully obtaining labor. So the prosecutors were quite focused on showing things like, were these employees paid correctly? Were they working more than they should have for the amount that they were receiving? The money is not so much, in terms of their pay, is not so much a focus of the book. I'm more interested in kind of the emotional aspect of what made these people want to get more deeply involved in OneTaste, what made them get to the point where, they were agreeing to do all this work on behalf of the company? And was that coercion? I think that was kind of the higher question at the trial, was like, will the jury feel that the circumstances of OneTaste amounted to serious harm? Like, were these employees doing work under the threat of serious harm?
And I guess the answer is yes, because they got convicted.
Yeah.
That
The jury,
fair?
it did. Yes, I think that is fair. I think, of course, we don't know what the jury felt. We tried to find the jurors afterward. They must have left through the back because I was not able to reach them. So we can only guess as to what they talked about in the deliberation room. But it does seem like, they agreed that the overall environment in which OneTaste was, and specifically Nicole and Rachel as the defendants, were obtaining the labor of some of these workers, mostly women, but were obtaining the labor of these workers. They generally must have agreed that amounted to serious harm and was not like a fair way to get someone's work.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. And obviously we're approaching this from different angles. And as soon as I heard about OneTaste, probably from your article, I'm guessing, although I didn't know who you were at the time, I was just, I tend to see things in a certain lens, right? Well, I'm like, clearly that's problematic for me. And I don't have the legal terms for it. Yeah, I didn't have the legal terms yet. But I know in speaking with Mara Penza, the prosecutor for Nexium, she was, or at least we were both like, wondering why it was just one count and why that was the only thing that they were going after. And to me, I see so many other things, but I guess the problem is, and this is an ongoing conversation, and whatever everyone's talking about in the cult space, is the fact that New York hasn't made coercive control illegal yet, and that would have really changed things. Is that a conversation that you have heard being batted around while you're waiting?
I mean, yeah, definitely. My impression in sitting in on that trial was that the law is really not a clear fit to what happens inside these groups. Mm-hmm. You see that prosecutors are, they're of course have a legal strategy and they're looking for the charge that is going to, that they feel is the right fit for what they have evidence for. And of course, I'm not a lawyer, so, and clearly the prosecutor's strategy worked in this case. But what's interesting is like, as a journalist, I'm often looking at the emotional narrative of this. That's the reason that I'm so curious and have been so fascinated by this topic, is that I think there's something that everyone can learn from what happened inside a group like OneTaste. Same for Nexium. It's like
absolutely
the social dynamics of what happens inside this little world they're so powerful, right? Like that is what is really at the heart of these questions around coercive control, these questions around subtle ways of manipulation, subtle ways of changing someone's state of mind so that they like believe different things. Often when there was conflict in the trial, it was because people were trying to put these kind of structures of the legal statute onto these very nebulous, right. They're amorphous but powerful things that happen inside these groups. And I think that was just interesting to me, that it's not a fit, right? Right. This is not a clear-cut thing. And yet, I think you can infer that the jury felt like something happened here. Something happened here that they felt it was correct to convict.
Yeah, you can't dust for fingerprints on emotional abuse. There's no real forensics for it, right? And I think legal has to emotionally convict them to the jury, as you said, in order to get some sort of feeling that there's an injustice here, because it's really hard to put language to emotional abuse. In our case, was fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on how you look at it, to have a physical evidence. And then that ended up being kind of an entry point of like, hey, people didn't agree to this. There must have been some sort of coercion. And then that became the case. Hopefully that can spill over into these cases.
It was
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to, I think the defense, somewhat understandably, often tried to drive home the point, like, they would ask witnesses during cross-examination, like, you were always free to leave, right? Like, no one was, you weren't locked in a room, like you weren't, no one had a gun to your head. And these witnesses, they would say truthfully, like, that is correct. Like I was not physically restrained, but there were times when the witnesses also tried to add things like, yes, it's true, I was not physically restrained. And it's complicated and it was hard. It felt like leaving, it was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. It felt like leaving behind everything in my life. And so, of course, that's a really hard thing to try to fit into a legal case. And so
I listened to the Dr. Phil episode about it, and you could literally cut and paste the explanations with the Nexium. Like if you had just said OneTaste and put in Nexium, the explanations for how it happened, the explanations for why you can just leave, all the things just sound exactly the same. So I guess there's a positive thing in that legal and consciousness is being built around how these things work,
Yeah.
For more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred, The True Story of How I Escaped Nexium, the Cult That Bound My Life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and at most bookstores. Highly recommend, of course, because she's my wife. And now, a brief message from our Little Bit Culty sponsors. Remember, when you support our sponsors, you support our podcast. Break time's over, people. Let's get back to this episode of A Little Bit Culty. It's a good one.
The why didn't you just leave? I know that's a big thing
Well, that was
happening
what
with
Bill
P.
Maher and P. Diddy.
You following the P. Diddy case?
A little bit, but
I
that's
know
obviously
you've
been
been
huge
busy.
news.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
I've been at the less crowded trial.
Same
Anyway.
building, right? Isn't it?
No, it's actually P. Diddy is in Manhattan, and this was happening.
Oh, he
in
is?
Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
And Brooklyn was where ours
Keith
happened,
was,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And Bonjean was Keith's lawyer.
Yes,
for a
Jennifer
minute.
Bonjean, who is Nicole's defense attorney, has also represented at times R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, and Keith Raniere.
She knows
Wow,
how, she knows how to
that's a
pick 'em.
track record.
Yeah.
That's a track record. Well, was there any particular witness? And I guess witnesses are anonymous. Is that right? These
That's
are
not true. They were testifying on under their legal names. There was,
Okay.
I think, given the nature of what they testified about, some of the news coverage decided to leave out their last names, but just because of the very sensitive nature. But yes, the witnesses, I mean, I think some of the most dramatic stuff that the witnesses testified about, and this didn't apply to all of them, but to at least three, was they testified about being directed to be the handler for OneTaste's lead investor, who was also for a period of time Nicole's boyfriend. So this man is someone who bankrolled OneTaste in sort of its early days when it was looking for funding. And several witnesses testified to at some point being asked and or directed, I think you could characterize it different ways, but being asked to serve as his handler, which basically meant doing household chores like feeding him, walking his dog, sort of cleaning the house, and then also servicing him sexually. So that meant usually some sort of hand job every day. And so this was like probably the most dramatic aspect of the case that the prosecutors put forth. And it's definitely something I discuss in the book. And that's a really like complicated dynamic that arose where, I think the defense also tried to push this argument that those women like agreed to it. And this was, they believed that it would be part of their spiritual growth. And that's, again, it's just where it gets complicated. It's like, I think they did believe that it was part of their spiritual growth. And I want to be careful about how I frame this topic because it's obviously really sensitive, but that was a big part of the trial.
Wow. Okay. Now I know we have 3 minutes left. So they're in jail. These two women are in jail. They're till sentencing, or how does that work?
So what happened was, they were convicted on Monday, and then on Tuesday they were somewhat unexpectedly taken into custody, and their sentencing has been set for late September. And in the meantime, they are in custody, and I believe that their attorneys are working as hard as they can to try to appeal the bail decision, which I'm not a legal expert, but I think that would be the main way to try to get them out pending sentencing. So I'm sure that that's something that they're working on. Their attorneys have also said that they plan to appeal, the broader case. I think it was, that's always been pretty clear that I think that, they plan to try to appeal the overall case. But in the meantime, I'm sure they're focusing on seeing if they can get them out of custody before sentencing.
Are you the only one writing a book, or is this a scramble right now?
No, I believe I'm the only one. If you hear of another one, let me know.
Yeah.
We'll be
like,
yours.
good luck.
Yeah, good luck. You're like, I got the scoop. That's amazing. And we're so glad that you're following this and that you were there and that you have the whole arc, because I think so many journalists that sort of have little tidbits of things like groups like OneTaste, they don't really see the full picture.
You seem to understand the whole
It's really
the whole picture.
we appreciate that.
Yeah.
It is nebulous and it is not black and white.
Definitely.
But I guess in this case, the law found one thing that was black and white enough to convict. So as a survivor, I'm very happy about that. I know you have to be neutral as a journalist, and I respect that. So yeah, looking forward to reading your book and having you back, and also to talk about WeWork.
Oh,
right.
I think that one I'm not allowed to do because that's like my Bloomberg. That's like my Bloomberg word.
That's the other version of you, right?
Never,
yeah, that's the other. I think so, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer. I thought it was like later. Okay.
Well, when does your book come out again? Sorry.
My book is scheduled to come out in November, and I cannot wait to talk about it with you both. I think it's going to be such an incredible conversation. And it really, the book, again, it's called Empire of Orgasm, and it really tells the whole story of the backstory of Nicole, how this group came to be. Like, it's really trying to tell, I think the psychology of it and the emotions of it are what's most interesting to me. But how it like rode the wave of like the wellness industry, and how it tried to make it, it became a pretty mainstream practice. It was like endorsed by Tim Ferriss, Gwyneth Paltrow, Khloe Kardashian.
I have a friend who did it.
Oh yeah. It was widespread.
I'm pretty sure, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm pretty sure that some people that I know from NXIVM who are from San Francisco also did it. And I have to double check.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, it was. I live.
A book party.
I'm from the Bay Area. I lived in San Francisco for a long time. I live in Oakland now, but they tons of people I know in SF have done this, or have brushed up against this community or taken classes. They were, definitely really popular for a while. But I think like what happened at the core and the stories of these people whose lives kind of became totally changed by OneTaste. That's what I find so fascinating, and I can't wait for people to read more about it.
Likewise.
Amazing.
I can't wait to see it.
Are you going to narrate the Audible?
That's what I'm hoping for. So we'll see.
Yay.
That'd be great.
Incredible. Well, let us know if you have like a book launch or something like that.
Yeah, we can have a book party. Ours is going to be coming out.
Well,
awesome.
I'm really, I think you guys are going to love the book. I'm really looking forward to talking about
Can't
it.
wait.
We can get all into it. Thanks for,
cool.
I'm glad we're in touch. Thanks for having me on.
So am I. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Have a great summer,
awesome.
And send us the book when it's ready.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Nice
Bye.
meeting you.
Bye, Ellen.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you like what you hear on A Little Bit Culty? Then please do give us a rating, a review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Or even better, share this episode with someone who you think needs to hear it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're a little bit susceptible. Just share the love. Thanks. Okay, everybody, that was it for Ellen. See you next week. Really looking forward to our summer with y'all, and any suggestions you have for the name of our special new Thursday bonus drop.
Feel free to comment on our IG about this one, because I'm reading some comments on some of the pages and people don't agree. They think it's First Amendment rights are being abused. It's a bias by the judge, but we'd love to hear you guys' take on it. Till then.
Bye for now.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production. Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with Amphibian Media. Our co-creator is Jess Temple-Tardy. Audio engineering by Red Cayman Studios, and our writing and research is done by Emma Deal and Kristen Reeder. Our theme song, Cultivated, is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslin.